So, at the moment, I feel like the writing team dismantling the Lich King, along with the Helm of Domination, was the biggest insult towards the old lore that the expansion then tried to capitalize on. The forging of the Crown of Wills that contributed to nothing else but a buff and crowning the character Pelagos in a new position that I didn't even care about at all before knowing how he was associated with the crown.
Yeah.
If you were in charge of the quest line related to the Crown of Wills, what would you have done and how would you have executed the plan for the broken Helm of Domination and its reforging if we really needed it?
All right, so first let me talk about the lead up to this. Yes, Blizzard ruined the story of Arthas. I think the story of the Lich King, not just Arthas. I think the history and the nuance of the Lich King was destroyed in Shadowlands, and that is a sad thing. But it's also over now. You know, it's a part of the history of World of Warcraft that has truly come to an end. It no longer really matters because we've defeated the ultimate power behind the Scourge. And so World of Warcraft, in that sense, it's over. So the ending was bad, but I mean, the majority of the story was really good. Everyone loved the Lich King up until the grand finale. That being said, the only excuse that I will come up with in Blizzard's stead for why they fucked up the story of Arthas and of the Lich King so badly is rewrites. So Shadowlands have been rewritten multiple times, and in very quick succession, they had to make giant changes to the story in order to fix what had ultimately happened within the Shadowlands. Do you want to get the best proof there is? Wait, before I do anything, let me just ask chat here. Is there anyone in chat that doubts that Shadowlands was rewritten? How many of you think the story of Shadowlands is 90% exactly what Blizzard wanted to have the story as? Like, this is the story that was planned, just a little bit rushed. They had to rush the story, but this was always going to be the story. Is there anyone in chat that believes that?
That they saw through that.
Chat does appear to have some fucking brains, so that's good. But if you want evidence of exactly just how rewritten the expansion was, the Soul Stream in the Shadowlands, the Soul Stream that everyone has seen. Now that we have Pelagos as the new Arbiter, we have Ouroboros fixed, all of the zones are fixed, the souls are supposed to go to all of their new zones, except it doesn't. The Soul Stream keeps going into the Maw. Why? Because the Soul Stream was hard-coded to go into the Maw. If Blizzard wants to change the direction of the Soul Stream, they will have to change everything. You don't hard-code something like that unless the plan originally was for the Soul Stream never to be fixed. The original plan was for the souls to always go to the Maw. I believe the original plan was most likely for us to lose in this expansion. Now, I don't know what triggered this change in rewrite. I don't know why they decided to rewrite it, but the fact that that Soul Stream is hard-coded and unchangeable, except if they were to recode and redo everything, tells you that something happened. Some kind of rewrite happened within that expansion. So that is important to know. Now, the other question you asked is how I would have handled the story of Arthas. That's difficult because I'd have to go back even further. It would depend on what point you want me to start at. So I can either start at where I would start with that story, which basically Anduin would never be in that position whatsoever. Or if you want me to start at the moment that we learn about Arthas, that becomes a lot more difficult, because now I'm basically doing triage on a story that I really don't like. Moni, did they specify where I should
Yeah,
start?
I was going to say specifically, let's go with let's just assume that everything, rewrites included, was meant as intended. So,
Okay.
we're already speculating on rewrites here.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've got the Helm of Domination was broken, and that led to the rift between our world and the Shadowlands
Yes.
to be opened.
Yeah.
Then we have the Primus come in towards the end, like the
Yeah.
11th hour, and reforge the Crown of Wills. That then becomes like the new headgear for soon to be Arbiter Pelagos.
Yeah.
I would say the Crown of Wills being reforged from the Helm of Domination was quite underwhelming, and I believe that's where the question really stems, is what would you have done to make the Crown of Wills more relevant instead of just being flashy headwear on the new Arbiter,
Oh,
because it really had no point after that.
okay. That's actually very easy. It has to do with player involvement. So, in a world where I would be the writer, the lead narrative designer for World of Warcraft, the reason that was incredibly underwhelming is because the player wasn't part of that story at all. Anyone that knows anything about the lore knows that the Crown of Wolves actually does exist. There is a Crown of Wolves. It's out there somewhere. We've never found out what happened to the original Crown of Wolves, other than, who knows, right? It doesn't matter. I think in the game they did actually say that it's lost, or some shit like that. But we know that there is an original Crown of Wolves. Now, what I would have done, if I was the writer, I would start a quest chain. The quest chain basically sends the player to the Twisting Nether. So the player has to go to Karazhan. Through Karazhan, they gain access to the Twisting Nether in search of the Crown of Worlds. I would have the player also go to the Scarlet Crusade, the Scarlet Monastery, perhaps an upgraded version of the Scarlet Monastery, where the player is hunting for the Crown of Worlds, going to basically all of the locations where this crown could possibly be. Sylvanas was the last person to have, verifiably had the Crown of Worlds in her possession, so we know that it has to be somewhere in Lordaeron. This would, by the way, also be, or we would find clues at least to its location in Lordaeron. This is where I would bring in the quest chain to clean up Lordaeron and maybe introduce Kalia Menethil already there, where Kalia helps us clean it up and also helps us look for the Crown of Worlds. And then after an extended quest line of the player hunting this Crown of Worlds, we find out that the Crown of Worlds is beyond our reach. So either the Crown of Worlds is inside the Worlds of the Void. This is where I would use this to set up sort of a future storyline that I might want to bring in. So I would probably have the Crown of Worlds be lost to the Void. In other words, Void creatures got their hands on it and they escaped our realm with the helm. This is so now I have a future story that I could definitely pull from whenever I need a new story to bring in. But now the player was a part of that story. The player was the one hunting the Crown of Wolves. The player was the one that sort of did the work. So the player is also the one to bring back the news that the crown is lost and we can't get it back. Now we start with the Primus. The Primus now sends the player on a myriad of adventures to find all the ingredients to ultimately form a new crown. Now, in this story, the way that I would write it, I would sort of specify that the new Crown of Wolves isn't going to be the same as the old one, because it is only created with a fragment of the Helm of Domination and not with a full one. This allows the player to immediately have that sort of split in their minds. There is a Crown of Will that's the really powerful one, and that's a story that we can definitely dive into in the future, should we need it. and then also this new Crown of Worlds, we are doing it sort of as a backup. I would have done the exact same thing, by the way, with the sigils. The sigils that basically just miraculously got remade. You know, Zuval spends the entire expansion hunting these sigils. Turns out he could have just made them himself, so to speak, right? I would have done more effort there as well to explain that these new sigils take a lot out of it. You know, maybe by creating a new sigil, a part of the zone is lost. So the sigils have so much power that it literally consumes the power from the zone itself. So a lot of the creatures die, for example, in the creation of these new sigils, which would then explain why Zuval hunted for these sigils, because he wasn't prepared to give up his souls, the souls that he had already acquired in order to make these new sigils. Just something, you know, something that gives a little bit of explanation for why things happen. We discussed this last night during the podcast on the Lifecraft episode. And by the way, if you want access to the Lifecraft episode, join Patreon. But we discussed this last night, where one of the most frustrating parts of the story, when you first arrive in the Shadowlands, you go to the Fate Scribe, and the Fate Scribe is standing next to this pillar thing, this sort of monument in Oribos. And when you talk to the Fate Scribe, the Fate Scribe tells you that there's something special about you, some connection that you have with Azeroth that allows you to never die. This is why your soul, when you die, don't venture into the Shadowlands, but instead remains on Azeroth. And then it also appears as if your soul is linked even here. So while all other creatures upon death in the Shadowlands die fully, you do not die. Now, that is an amazing bit of lore to explain why people do not die, why we as characters don't die. And you might sit there and you might look at this and say, who cares, dude? Like, fuck it, it's just death. But it matters to lore people like myself. To someone that cares about the lore, having that explanation for why we never die is nice. You know, it's nice. And it's not necessarily even something that I thought about in the past. But when they told me, I was like, oh my god, that's cool. The problem is it opens so many new doors of frustration, because are we the only ones that never die? Is it just us that have this connection with Azeroth, or do all mortals have this connection if they have titans? You can go watch the podcast if you want. I think we discussed it for almost half an hour, if I'm not mistaken. We really deep dove into that. But I love lore things like that, and I feel like it's important, if you're gonna have a story, that you include the player in that story. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, honestly, I I wanted to start with this question because while we were doing the podcast yesterday, I almost broke this question out as a discussion topic in the podcast, but I didn't want to cross the streams on our different shows.
Yeah.
That being said, I've got one more, and then we'll go into the folks in the lobby. This one just builds into the Crown of Wills, so I just think they kind of mesh well. Ivanheim asks, Accolonn, I would like to know whether or not you might agree with this. I think that we can all agree the Shadowlands had an insane amount of wasted potential. Do you think it would have worked if, in theory, Blizzard would have let the Jailer win, unmake reality, and then somehow we get a WoW 2.0 off the ground coming out of Shadowlands?
WoW 2.0? Probably not. WoW 2.0 would be too risky. We've already discussed that multiple times in the past. WoW 2.0 would be very risky, because you have no idea whether WoW 2.0 is actually going to bring a lot of players back, but you have every notion or every right to believe that it will cost you players. A lot of people will not play WoW 2 because they want to have their mounts, they want to have their pets, it's a whole mess. And if you do give them all of their pets and all of their mounts that they had from WoW 1, you're really starting a new game with a hell of bloat on the other side. right? So it is a risky thing. And yeah, Final Fantasy XIV did take the risk, but it was a massive risk. The difference was Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 was basically dead at the time that Yoshi P took over and basically went in and fixed it. World of Warcraft is not yet dead. If by some miracle Dragonflight fails entirely, maybe Blizzard does go WoW 2, because at that point they have nothing to lose, so to speak. But I would, to get back to the question, I would still have had Zuvul win. The ultimate domination of a universe is going to take some time. It's not going to happen immediately. Zuvul isn't going to snap his fingers and instantly dominate the universe. If Zuvul won, we would still have more than enough time to continue the story, have us go back to Dragonflight, bruised and bent, trying to basically prepare for the penultimate war. But this now opens so many new storylines, because now I can build a universe in conflict. Because imagine what happens after the Dragonflight expansion. You know, this gives us a reason to go to the Dragon Isles, by the way. If you ever wanted a reason to go to the Dragon Isles, Zuvul wins the Shadowlands. We now need a strong Azeroth. A strong Azeroth is not possible without Dragonflights. We go to the Dragon Isles in order to re-establish the Dragonflights so that we are strong enough and preparing for the war. This gives you the opportunity to let go of the factions. Why? Because there's no more factions. There is only war. And the war cannot be between the two factions of Azeroth, because the war is soon going to be with the universe as a whole. This gives us a reason for ultimately rushing into a unified and more codified Great Beyond, because the expansion after that could be the newly dominated forces of Zuvul attacking Azeroth, and we could start meeting some of the alien species. Now basically, you know, make Zuvul the emperor of the empire, right, of the Imperium. And Zuvul now has all of these planets under his dominion, and we face off against these different beings that attack us, and maybe we meet new allies, creatures from other planets that have managed to survive the domination process. So Azeroth is spared the domination through the will of Azeroth herself, giving even more mystery around how powerful Azeroth actually is, that Azeroth can actually stop this. Like, she could actually resist Zuvul. So the victory that Zuvul would have, we would stop Zuvul from being able to kill Azeroth, but we would not stop Zuvul from being able to dominate the universe. So Azeroth manages to keep us safe, but this starts a new war. It makes Zuvul this big bad guy in the background. He's not going to have any real story right now, but we are going to deal with him in the future. So I would absolutely have had Zuvul win the Shadowlands, so to speak. Absolutely.